don't know if you can hear it, but it makes some weird noises from the back end, but only going backwards. Oh, welcome to Peugeot ownership. Hello everybody, welcome to number 27. I'm Jack, and today is another really happy day because I've got myself another French hot hatch. So I've had a 205 Gti 1.9. I had the BX 16 valve, the Tomato. The first one was Pepé, second one was the Tomato. This is another small pug, and it is a 106 Rallye, the phase 2, the 1.6. And I think he might just have to become Pepé's son, Pepé the second. Anyway, in this video I'm going to tell you why I bought Pepé the second, what makes these sort of 106 Rallyes quite so special. Then we'll have a quick look around. I'll take him for a drive and see how this one in particular goes, and lastly I'm going to tell you my plans for it. So first of all, just look at the colour of this. I absolutely love it. This sort of French blue, French racing blue is just amazing, and these 106 Rallyes, like the 205 Rallyes, really, they just look so right with those sort of fat steelies. Look better than any alloy could hope to look, for me anyway, personally, in white like that, contrasting with the bodywork. They look absolutely amazing. The 106 generally was also a really nice little design, so that also helps. This is a phase 2, as I mentioned, so it's got a slightly different, in a way, cuter, less angular front end than the phase 1s. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. This particular car, I happen to know, has had, it looks fairly tidy, but it has had the boot done. So these are infamous for going in that area, and this has been completely welded, and also Metin, the guy I bought it from, who is also a friend, had it sort of partly seam welded there as well, which is obviously nice. But the boot's been done. I've had a quick look underneath, and it looks fairly tidy. There's a couple of little sort of bits of sill which are slightly squashed, I think because they were sort of it's where people try and jack them up when they don't know. But let's have a little look at the engine. It's a 1.6. It's a venerable, I think it's the XU series, but it's been in so many sort of pugs. So here it is. It's a 1.6, it's an 8 valve, it puts out 103 horsepower, so not very much, but that's part of the reason why I wanted this car actually, but I'll explain more later. It's obviously got a new, very recent exhaust manifold, which is nice. That's a bit bizarre. Is that normal? There's a little, I guess it's probably just part of the casting, there's a little hole there, but doesn't mean anything. I'm pretty sure it's also been chipped. I don't know if that's made any difference or not, and obviously it has a strut brace. I think it has one underneath as well. The engine mounts have been changed on this particular car by the previous owner, so that's quite nice. And apart from that, as I mentioned, you know, bodywork, it looks all right. There's a few little niggly bits, so there's a bit of paint reaction there where the wings I think have been repainted, but it's not very noticeable, and it just looks lovely. Let's have a look inside. So seat's pretty good. Little bit of sagging there, but for a French hatch of this vintage, that's really not bad at all. It's got a weird shaped gear stick. We'll talk about that more when I take it for a drive, but otherwise part of the magic of these cars is just that rather than put up the power, what Peugeot did was just take weight out. As a result, this only weighs, I think, 855 kilos, which is absolutely nothing. So it's got things like manual windows. It doesn't have power steering. I'm not sure if the normal 106s did. I suspect they did. But there's loads, all the luxuries have sort of been taken out of it. But generally, the interior looks pretty good, in pretty good condition, really, from a first sight. Now, there is another steering wheel there. That's thanks to Metin. It had this originally because I actually did a video on this car comparing it to a Gti Yaris, and I preferred this a few years ago, and I absolutely loved the little 106. Now, I know if you're driving it really hard, the Yaris is amazing, but I just don't drive cars to that kind of... I don't like driving them to that sort of limit on the road. And driven at normal speeds, this was a lot of fun. Since then, a lot of time has passed and things have been done to it, so it'll be interesting to see how it compares to when I drove it. But I asked Metin to throw in that wheel that he had it originally with the Boss, because although it is nice to have the original, I personally really do... I do like those Momos, plus it pushes it a little bit towards you, and I think it just works a little bit better in terms of seating position for me. But let's take it out for a quick drive and see how it is. Oh, welcome to Peugeot ownership. The windscreen wipers have just got stuck on for no apparent reason. The rear one's working. Oh, wow, that is unreal. Right, okay, we'll have to go with them as they are. Pepé the second doesn't disappoint. So it's got, I've forgotten quite how cramped the pedal box is, and I've got quite big feet, size 11s, and it's quite hard to get enough room in there, but it's really nice to be back in this thing. Come on, work. No, windscreen wipers are stuck. Okay. I mentioned earlier that there was something going on with this gear change because it doesn't look right, and I had a look at it, and it's got... A, I know this has a quick shifter, so it feels quite different to what it used to feel like before, but B, I think the lever is also canted slightly back for a slightly better sort of gear shift position. Quite nicely. I mean, that's not what this car is about, but it's got a little bit of pep. Certainly feels like more than its normal 103 horsepower. Now it has like a non-standard exhaust. I don't know if the manifold that's been put on is standard either. Definitely sounds quite fruity, and it sounds peppier than it should do, frankly. This is a Phase 2 106 Rally, and there is actually a fair bit of difference with the Phase 1. The Phase 1 had a 1.3 engine because at the time they had to have that to conform to the Rally specs that were around then. Afterwards that changed to 1.6, which also has the facelifted bodywork. So the first Rally is really the one which is most sought after, and there's a reason for that. It's the lightest and people say the purest. This one I think is another 25 kilos heavier, so the original was 825, I think this is 845 or 855. This is still a useful about 80 or 90 kilos heavier, lighter, sorry, than the 16 valve, so it's definitely still a light car, but they do say the Mark 1 is the better driving experience if you're really on it. The other thing is that 1.3 is really revvy, so it develops peak power at 7,200, whereas this is a bit torquier and develops its peak power at 6.2. Now obviously that has some advantages as well. Plus there were some other improvements to the Phase 2, such as the disc brakes at the back. I haven't driven a Phase 1, I guess it's probably a little bit purer being lighter, but I don't think there's going to be a huge amount in it really, especially as a day-to-day driver's car, which is what I wanted this for. So essentially I have sold Fred, who was my sort of lovely Frog Eye Sprite. I say I've sold it. It went on collecting cars. There was a bit of a mix-hap, so it didn't sell, but it is going to be sold. I'm talking to a few other people about that. But I wanted something to use sort of day to day. And also with the way that petrol prices are now, I wanted something that wouldn't cost that much to run. My friend Metin had this. He's had this before. It was on my video. He bought it back, and Metin is one of these people that if you offer the right money, he will always sell you whatever car he has, pretty much. So I knew he'd be willing to. I thought I'd have a bit of spare cash selling Fred, although that's not quite the case yet. And so I made him an offer and got Pepé. The unassisted steering is the highlight of these cars. It's just awesome, and they sort of scrabble on for grip. This has some Nankangs and NS2Rs, I think, which are quite grippy tyres. I had them on my 964, so it's got a fair amount of grip, really. The driving position for me isn't great. It's going to be a lot better with that wheel. Pepé also has a set of Bilstein V8s, so he's definitely riding a little bit firmer than when I last drove him. And one of the beautiful things about these cars is how they sort of flow through bumpy roads. This still does that, but at lower speeds it feels firmer. I'm not sure I'm actually a huge fan of that. Likewise, the short shifter. Yes, it makes the shift shorter, but it makes it feel a little bit notchier than it did before. I'm not sure really that it is a complete improvement, to be honest. But chuck it through some tight corners like that and it is just awesome. I think this is going to make a great daily for me. I also still have the Merc, but I just love these, and I couldn't, you know, I couldn't let the opportunity go to pick one up. It was always going to happen at some point that I was going to get another French car. I've had an eye on a DS, but it's just, they're too old. This at least can sort of stay outside at least part of the year. So my plans with Pepé for the future are that in a week, I think it is, I am going to take him down to pug one off. The Peugeot 205, 106, 306 experts who I've dealt with before. They helped me with Pepé the first. And Matt there is going to have a look round and tell me what he thinks. He'll have a drive as well, tell me if he thinks anything needs doing. Now, I think this is a good car on the whole, because I know Metin, I know what he did before, but there are a few little issues there. The idle's a bit lumpy, but that could just be the chip that's been put on. I'm not completely convinced that the suspension, although the car's much tighter, I'm not totally convinced that the suspension is an improvement on standard. I guess it just depends how hard you're going to drive these things. Likewise, it is a little bit boomy, and because I want to use it as a daily, I don't really know if that's quite what I'm looking for. But the engine definitely feels better than I remember from before. So if we start off, say, at 3,000 revs, lovely little corners here. There's a noticeable sort of step up in power at 5, which I can't remember, but it's fun. So it just feels a bit revier. It might be that ECU in the exhaust, but overall it is as good to drive as I remember for one of these tiny little cars, especially considering that, yes, it was expensive to buy for what it is. Like everything else, it's gone a bit crazy, and I ended up paying over £4,000 for it. 4,000, I wish. Over £8,000 for it. But it should be relatively cheap to maintain. I can have a bit of fun with it. It's a car that can be used over winter as long as I look after it. And I know it's silly, but I love the way it looks. It just looks so right. And crucially, it is also one of the issues I had with the 205, although I really liked Pepé the first, was that it was really built like a crisp packet. I mean, and I know, I guess that shouldn't matter, but it did. It sort of wore away at me. When you're driving it daily, it is quite annoying to be in something that feels quite so cheap. And this is a nice kind of step up from that. It's not a luxury car by any means, but it's a bit more solid. It has a few less rattles, and the stuff doesn't all feel like it's just going to break away in your hand. So for me, I think, you know, it's a great compromise. Anyway, I am absolutely delighted to be back with a French car. Want to sort out those windscreen wipers, which have annoyed me straight off. But that's just the way it is, I think, with these sort of hatches from that era. So I've noticed, I don't know if you can hear it, but it makes some weird noises from the back end, but only going backwards, as if something's touching. It's a weird one. I'll have to take a look at that. On the plus side, I can say that it was totally my fault that the wipers weren't working, because I had stuck the camera to the outside on the window at the top there. Normally I wouldn't think wipers would reach that, and they had flicked past it and then we're stuck on it, and because the camera was right behind the mirror, I couldn't see that. So apologies to all French hatchers the world over There's nothing wrong with it. The wipers work absolutely fine. It was totally my fault. Thank you so much all for watching. Really look forward to seeing you for the next one. If you have any questions, contact me on Instagram, and see you for the next video.